Okay, so show us how we could get even an idea of how we make kraut.
Okay, so basically all you need is a cabbage, knife, a bowl, a mason jar, and and good salt. And salt is really, really key, as you can imagine, because this is what's doing the work to sort of help set the stage for the kraut. You're going to take a cabbage and get organic, because I always say, why do you want to put a bunch of pesticides in a jar that you're turning into bionic food?
Not a good idea.
So, just peel the outer layers off and save a couple of the layers, because we'll use those to make sort of a little blanket to help keep all the cabbage tucked in at the end. Because what happens is mold is the biggest thing that people struggle with, because oxygen, this is an anaerobic process and you need to keep it all underneath. So we're going to take this. So you're going to just take the wedge out. And so then you'll have 4 pieces, or if you like longer strips, just cut that core out. And then just cut them into 1/8, 1/4 inch strips. It doesn't matter. Just sort of keep them uniform, because this is going to go through this microbial process. And so you want it to be somewhat similar. So when you're done with that, you're going to just have, just dry cabbage.
Amazing.
Then you're going to take your sea salt. And again, we use this along with a couple other salts. It's a Celtic sea salt. And when you see color in salt, that's minerals. And this is really why I think these foods, where you can really change by the different minerals that are in the salts, because this is a wild fermentation process where we are not inoculating it with any cultures. We're just using the microbes that come, and we're adding salt, and then the rest of the magic is going to happen. So you're going to add probably about a tablespoon, but anywhere from 2 to 4 teaspoons. And then you're just going to start massaging it.
So that's not that much. Is that a whole cabbage?
This is a whole head of cabbage. Yeah, so they're kind of smaller cabbages, but
2 to 4 teaspoons to a whole cabbage?
Yes. Yeah, you're roughly a tablespoon. So
wow.
So again, these are on the smaller side, but the thing is, so you're just going to start massaging it. And this is based on, 1 3/4 pound, because that's what I know will fit inside of a mason jar, and you're not having to throw a bunch of stuff away. So what we're doing is just slowly starting this fermentation process. We're putting the salt on, it's drying the liquid out of the cabbage, and then this brine solution will be created from that. So see, it's really crispy cabbage, and so this takes a while. You don't need fancy equipment at all. There's a lot of, I found this in my mom and dad's garage a long time ago, and you can use something like this. You can use the bottom of a mason jar, but again, just massaging it. I always think of all these little muscles are getting work, while I'm doing it. So, again, you're just getting this started. You're drying the moisture out, and you can, if you're busy, you can just do that. Throw the salt on it and let it sit for an hour or 2, and the salt's going to do the work. So you don't have to do all this, but just that agitation is really what helps pull the brine out. So now I made this morning, and I worked it a little bit, but can you see?
Yeah.
Can you see all of that liquid that came out of the cabbage?
Yeah, amazing.
So there's nothing else added to this. Every once in a while, cabbage is different, no matter, depending on where it comes from, but the varieties that are grown over the winter sometimes are grown to not hold moisture. So sometimes you can go through this and you don't get the brine you need out. So then we'll teach you how to make a little brine at the end. So anyway, once it's like that and all worked out, we're going to stick it in your jar. And there's little funnels. Again, you don't need them.
Yeah,
but
just shove it in there.
Yeah. So we're going to shove it in.
So amazing.
Have you ever made kraut before?
I never have.
Well,
You know I'm gonna do it. I can't
I
wait.
know you are, and you should. And grab a neighbor.
Yeah.
And okay, now do you see all this brine?
Yeah.
So, and you really want to fill it up to about, about an inch or so below, because again, oxygen is not a good thing. And that's where, like, if you just let this sit there, probably after a month or so, it would start molding on the top. But what we're going to do is set up the environment so that doesn't happen. So remember I said save some leaves.
Yeah.
So you can just push the leaves in, and that's going to keep any of the little bits that would otherwise float up. Okay. And then I get my rock. Look at this. It has a cute little thumb indentation. And then you might have to pour a little brine out. But now, when I do this, the brine is all the way up to the top.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And you really want to push it down because you don't want any air in there. So if you had air pockets, again, it could mold down there.
So wait, after it's already done, obviously as you eat through the jar, you're going to have air. So this is during the fermenting process.
During the fermentation process, yeah. That could, if you took all the brine out and just let it sit in there, I don't even think it would mold. I think it would just kind of just dry out a little bit.
Okay.
But this way, we're just trying to make sure there's no air on here. And then again, plastic is kind of nice to use, but you can use stainless, or you can put a piece of parchment, just because it's a salty brine.
Could corrode the metal.
It just,
but yeah, you could.
And then people worry.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to say, whenever I teach, the number one thing people are worried about is killing their family with something bad or something wrong. And I'm like, you know what? People die every day from processed foods. Like hundreds of thousands of people die every day from processed foods. There's not one documented case of anybody ever dying from, naturally fermented products gone wrong. Because your eyes, your nose should give you the hint first before it goes in your mouth.
I mean, there are obviously people who've died from improper canning of foods in previous generations, but that's different. That's a different process.
Pickling, and that's why all that stuff scares me, right? I like this because I'm not trying to trick nature. I'm not trying to get this, and you're setting up a perfect little environment for things to grow. Here, the only things that are growing are the things that we want.
Yeah. Amazing. And how long would that take?
Well, so this will, the pH is going to drop down into the 3s probably within the first week. I would just let it sit someplace for a month because I know it just gets better. You could get into it in 2 weeks, but it's going to taste probably a little bit more like coleslaw. And the microbes are doing their magic, and the flavors just get better and better with time. So
are you leaving it out like on a counter?
Out on the counter, on a plate, because what's going to happen, or a bowl, and out of the sunlight. Ideally, out of the sunlight, and ideally, if you could have it in a place that's, under 70 degrees, because if it's warmer, it's going to ferment faster. And, we didn't talk a whole lot about salt, but the salt is the most important thing to get right. And you want it to taste like you have really oversalted your food, because that salt's going to subside during the process, but you need it to be a certain level to make sure the yeast or these other bacteria don't take over, which will create mold or which will not keep it crunchy, right?
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting. I'm sure that there's so much more to learn, but we could get started and follow you and find a lot of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. We love sharing, and I really appreciate the opportunity, because this is a passion of mine, and it helps so much when there are people like you out in the world shining the light on those of us saying, whoa, I'm making, we're making this food. Now we need to get it out there.